Hi, everybody. I guess it's my turn. I was just kind of relaxing on the beach. You know how that goes, right? Well, welcome to this session of our virtual conference. And the title of this session is Reflective Practice, the Journal, from the Mind to the Page. And my name is Mrs. Ruth Pitman. I am so honored to be part of the OAT Leaders team. And as a large group, we learn a lot from each other, don't we? We talk as professionals, and the support we receive from each other is wonderful and helpful. I learn a lot from you guys, and I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. As an art teacher, I live in North Carolina, and I've taught many grades and many age levels from preschool all the way to college and university. So I'm well-rounded in my approach as an educator. I deal with a lot of teachers, administrators. I've taught both in the core classroom. I've taught adjunct university level, or how to use art and music in the regular classroom. So I've seen a lot, and I've dealt with a lot. And so, but here I am, still teaching. I am also an artist, so I am creative, and I think a lot outside the box. So what I want to say to you today, I want you to pretend that you are just one-on-one and we're just having a private conversation. We could be sitting at the beach, right? Sitting next to me. Or we've decided, hey, let's go to the little snack bar up there and let's grab something to drink, maybe an iced tea or coffee, or maybe a little fruity drink on the side, and we can have a one-on-one conversation. This whole topic of journaling has been near and dear to my heart for a long, long time. And so I feel like it's an important kind of thing. Maybe some of you journal, maybe some of you don't. Maybe some of you have been in sessions similar to this one. Maybe some of you like to doodle and draw in your journals, okay? I tend to kind of write and write and write. But I want to give you a kind of different slant to this, how this can be such a valuable thing as an educator, especially when you look back. And reflective practice is an important thing, right? And so when we look back and we see how we've grown, it's great. It just helps us along the way and helps us to focus and carry on what we're doing. Let's go to the next slide. So we all have a story, right? We all have a story. And I want to read to you a quote that was written by Robert Downey Jr. And it says this: "Everyone has a story, and the story changes. And the more I can root into the truth of things, it's so hard. I don't think anyone ever really puts it all together. But somewhere along the way, it all became fused." It's so true, isn't it? And I look back at my childhood, and I think about my own story. I know many of you think back to your childhood, and you think, well, it was pretty good. Or maybe it was traumatic, maybe it was sad, right? So all of us have a story, and we bring that to professional lives and other parts of our lives, whether we realize it or not. But it's a good thing to think about it and to look through that grid as to what we bring to our teaching professions. So when we are faced with life circumstances, we tend to look through that grid of whatever affected us in our childhood, and that could extend to our professional lives. What might affect one person may not necessarily affect another person. So when we understand what has happened to us in our early childhood and maybe beyond, it really does help us to get a grip on what we are facing today. And for me, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about my childhood, but for me, the number one thing was fear. And fear raises its ugly head in different forms in my life. But what I have learned, and through the help of journaling, is that I know what my triggers are. And I think I've learned along the way things that can help me deal with fearful, or what I perceive as fearful situations. So, I've kept journals through the years. And, if you look back at my journals, you would probably laugh at some things I've written. I've kept one. This is from the 8th grade, right? People call them diaries too. But this one has one of those little lock and keys. I did not want my 4 older brothers getting into my journal, right? And I look back at it, and a lot of it was school related. Some had to do with teachers that I had, maybe good teachers, maybe not so good teachers, maybe friends that I had, and maybe some crushes on some teachers that I had too. One of them was, well, I won't tell you his name, but anyway, that was an interesting thing to look back on when I was flipping through it the other day. And so, and my journals now are just, I brought several in here, are just basically one long run-on sentence. It's just like a steady stream of consciousness. I don't worry about proper grammar. I doodle in them sometimes, not so much. It's more of the writing, just more of my writing my thoughts. And I usually do it in the morning. When I get up, I'll do some reading, some other things, but I usually write down, like what's coming this day, what struggles I had yesterday, what things I've had to work through, some funny things. So, and we'll talk about the kinds of things that you can write in your journal later on. So, when we keep a journal, it becomes a catharsis for us, right? It becomes something that releases emotions, helps us regulate emotions, helps us to kind of keep on track of what we need to figure out for the day, or things that happened yesterday, and things that we did to get us through whatever we're going through, right? There was a time when I took all my journals to a fire pit that we had out back of our house, and I burned them all. I just burned every single one of them. Do I regret doing that? Not really. It was a pivot in my life, and I needed to move forward with something, and it was okay. It didn't bother me. And I gave up for a while journaling, but maybe a month or so later, it's like, yeah, I need to start writing again, because I just found how helpful it was for me. So as an educator and a professional, there are several things that come to mind. And these are the things that have become evident in my educational journey. And my journals are, I wrestle with different things. So here are some thoughts for you today to think about as you carry on with your journals. So the first one, looking forward involves looking backwards. And that's so true, isn't it? Have you ever had anybody say to you, just forget it and move on? I've had that said to me many times in the past. And yet there are times when we need to pick up our bootstraps and move forward, right? But sometimes looking forward involves looking backwards. I have a quote that I wrote in one of my journals in 2017. She said this: "I am convinced that the ability to remember as if it happened yesterday is a gift, even though some days it feels like a curse." Interesting quote. Let me read it again. "I am convinced that the ability to remember as if it happened yesterday is a gift, even though some days it feels like a curse." And my response to that I wrote in my journal was to look for the good despite the pain. Right? To look for the good despite the pain. My next thought or question was, what ideas are born through journaling? You may have something, that's perking in the back of your mind, and you think, I need to do this. Maybe it's just something to do with a lesson plan. Maybe it's just a goal that you have in your life. And one of the goals that I had as I moved along in education was, I really want to go and get my Praxis 2 in art. I really feel like that's the direction I want to go in my later years of teaching. So it was born in my journal. I said, I'm going to find out what it takes to get my Praxis 2 in art. So that kind of set me on a course. I took it, I passed, and I'm glad I did, because here I am teaching art full-time. It's great. All right, next thing I thought of was, how can I improve? Did I have blind spots? In one of my journals in 2017, I wrote down, I'm a pretty independent person, and I don't like to burden people with problems or issues that I have. I think that's part of my childhood too. I tend to keep things to myself. But one of the blind spots I had was that, yes, I share things with my husband and maybe some close friends, but, we have 3 grown sons. And I thought, do you think that they could give me a perspective on things? They know their mother well enough. Of course. So why was I holding back on some things? Maybe it was to do with the job situation. Their perspective was a gold mine for me and made me think about some things. So that was one area I could start to improve on. How did I handle certain situation? I remember one time at a particular school, I had been observed by an administrator, and I felt like her observation was very unfair. And so a dear colleague, another teacher friend, went to them and said, look, Ruth has done this and this and this. And these are some of the things you don't see about her, but I see her on a regular basis, and I know what she's doing in the classroom. And so that administrator came to me later on. I wrote this all down in my journal, and she apologized to me, and she said, I was unaware of some of these things, so I'm going to raise your score, blah, blah, blah. But what I took away from that was that, there's times I need to be a little bit more assertive and stand up for myself. And there's a difference between being assertive and being aggressive, right? And how you word things and your whole attitude. But that was something that I took away from that particular situation. And, there's times when, you may have a parent, and this brings me to my next point, or interactions with people. Maybe you have parents. You do have parents, kids in your class, that some of them are not happy with what you're doing, or they want to criticize different things, or, and through the years I've learned, I write it down in my journal, I want to defend myself, but this and this and this is what I'm going to say to them. And yeah, you have to have your facts in order if it's a certain child that you're dealing with, a certain student you're dealing with. But what I've learned too, I might write down certain things, how to defend myself as a teacher, but is there something going on in that person's life? Especially during the pandemic, it was tough on a lot of people. And is there other outside things going on in that person's life? And how do you deal with that particular person? So just, I guess, having the wisdom to know what to say to certain people. Was I fearful? That was my grid, right? Still is. Was I fearful? Should I have spoken up? Was I aggressive or assertive? I talked about that, those last two questions. But the whole fear factor. Oh, yes, many times I've been fearful. And I heard a good speaker recently, his name is Dr. Tim Keller, say this: what is it that I'm so afraid of losing? So it's not just fear, but what is it that I'm so afraid of losing? And I thought to myself, that's it. Wrote it down in my journal. Am I afraid of losing face in front of my colleagues? Am I afraid of losing a relationship? Although I know I can't please everyone. Am I afraid of starting something new? And of course, I have to remind myself in my journals not to react, but to respond and to look what the real issues are, right? And this was something that happened outside of school. I'm not going to go into details in 2018, but it affected my profession. And I actually won my case, and I could walk away from that certain situation. Did I receive help? Did I succeed in something? And of course, the longer I've been in the educational journey, the more I've learned to ask for help. 9 times out of 10 people are so helpful. People want to help. And in turn, I could give to other people and help them. So, that's a whole team aspect, and not being afraid to asking for help. Did I succeed in something? Sure. And I've written things down, and, in succeeding in something, I've obviously have learned how to succeed in something, and then I can pass that along and help someone else succeed. Choices, waiting. Sometimes, we have choices to make at the end of the school year. Maybe some of you are moving along into a different classroom, a different school, a different district, a different state, maybe a different country. And so, you're waiting to hear back from administration, where you're to be in the educational dance, I call it. Guess what? I've been there recently, so I know exactly how you're feeling and what you're going through. And so writing it all down, and boy, I can look back and say, okay, so this happened today. I feel like I did well in that interview. I think they might want me, kind of thing. And so one of the things I wrote down in my journal, 2018, I just have to take one task at a time, right? One task at a time, one day at a time, one challenge at a time. Were there any surprises? Yeah, there's been some surprises. There was one school I had interviewed at, and the principal said to me, she said, we think you would do well in this position, but we have another position over here. Would you be interested in teaching? And it was actually second grade that year. And I said, yeah, okay. Other surprises that happened to me? Well, there was one surprise where the district office came in. This was at a gifted and talented school, and I was teaching math. Not my favorite subject to teach, but I was fine at it. I was teaching math. And I thought, I'm going to bring a creative aspect to it. And I play guitar and sing. And so to teach that math concept, I decided that day to play my guitar and teach the concept. And the district office came walking through just at that moment. And it was pretty cool. So that was definitely a surprise that I wrote about in my journal. Did I have an attitude of gratitude? Now, some people, that's all they do in their journals. Every day, they look for something to be thankful for. And I got to remind myself of that too. Some people may do that before they go to bed at night. They write down, it could have been a terrible, lousy day, but they find something to be thankful for. And I think there's a lesson in that we can all learn. So overall, when you are journaling, all of these pieces can fit together as a puzzle in our professional lives. Are we connecting the information that we've written in our journals or blogs to create a deeper understanding of what's going on in our lives and how we can apply it to our profession? I think about embroidery. I used to do embroidery years ago. I don't do it as much now, but some of you may like to do embroidery. And you know how you're taking the threads and you're sewing and whatnot, and the back of your embroidery just looks like a real mess, right? You've got threads going all across from each other. You got all these knots and everything. And you think, ugh, what a mess. But then you turn it over and you see how it all fused together and how beautiful it became. And so I think with journaling, this is the back. This is the back of the embroidery, right? But when you look back and you see how it all fuses together and how beautiful it can become, it's just a great thing. The house. So this is something that you are on your own. You can free draw, you can doodle, you can free write, you can write a poem, a prayer, inspiration. I've cut out pages from old books, great quotes or paragraphs or whatever, and glue it into my journal. You can consider a quote and put it in your journal. There's no right or wrong. It is your journal. Make it your own. Make a homemade one. Recycle paper. There is even processing going on even while you do this. Don't feel guilty if you don't write in it regularly. I'm going to say that again. Do not feel guilty. There was a time when I thought, well, I don't know, I'm getting tired of this. This is not for me. And, I'm not going to do it. But, when I learned that statement and said, don't feel guilty if I don't write in every day, that was freeing. It's like some days I don't write in it for 2 weeks, a month. It's all right. Come back to it, put the date, and say, okay, so I've been out of this for a while. This and this and this is what has happened, and that's okay. So the next part, conclusion. It is your story. The best is yet to come. I actually have a journal that has that title. Ooh, where am I here? The best is yet to come. And it is, because we can learn and we can grow as we look back at our journals. So there's value in looking back. Consider your grid and how you function in your profession. Have you grown? What things are you still working on? Are you able to open yourself to new experiences? And how did that go? Celebrate that you've taken this step towards self-improvement. Are you ready to journey? Let's go. Thanks all. And I hope you have a wonderful summer. And remember, take your journal to the beach too. See you later.